First of all, I want to tell you that I made a mistake and got a little close to my stepson, and I want to tell you about it. As I sipped my coffee, I looked out the window. Ethan was in the garden, trimming trees. Sweat dripped down his forehead and his muscles tensed as he worked in the sun. I stared at him for a moment. He was no longer a child. He was only 18 when we started sharing a house with him, and now he was 23. How quickly time was passing. It had been 2 years since John's death. Ethan had been there for me ever since. At first, we leaned on each other as we both tried to work through the pain of loss. Over time, that leaning gave way to a deeper connection. I don't know exactly when these feelings began to change. Perhaps as Ethan grew closer to me each day. Perhaps as I began to see him as a man. When Ethan came in after finishing his gardening chores, I handed him a glass of water. "You're so tired. Take a rest," I said softly. He kept his eyes on me as he drank the water. We both wanted to say something, but the words seemed to choke in our throats. That evening, at the dinner table, we talked less than usual. It was as if every word added to the latent tension that was growing between us. I could feel the way Ethan looked at me, no longer the way a son looks at his mother. Ethan noticed that my interest in him had changed too. We both questioned what these new feelings meant, but we couldn't talk about them. Please subscribe to support me. That night, I couldn't sleep, tossing and turning in bed, seeing Ethan's face. It was impossible to ignore the growing tension between him and me. But what could I do? He was my stepson. We weren't related by blood, yes, but what would society say? He was John's son. As these thoughts swirled in my head, suddenly there was a soft knock on my door. "Laura, are you asleep?" It was Ethan's voice. I got out of bed and walked to the door. When I opened it, he was standing in the hallway. He was only wearing a t-shirt and boxers. There was a kind of uneasiness in his eyes, like he wanted to say something but didn't dare. "Is something wrong, Ethan?" I asked, concern in my voice. "I couldn't sleep," he said, looking away from me. "There's something I need to talk to you about." I invited him in. When he entered my room, the air suddenly felt heavy. We sat side by side on the edge of the bed, silent for a while. Finally, Ethan reached out and took my hand. His touch was warm, but at the same time he was shaking. "Laura," he said in a hoarse whisper. "I feel something has changed between us lately. Do you feel it too? Please subscribe to support me." My heart was beating fast. I turned towards him and looked into his eyes, and they held the same complex emotions I felt. Fear, desire, maybe a little guilt. "Yes," I whispered. "I feel it." Ethan leaned slowly toward my face. I gasped for breath. For a moment, I wanted to stop everything, but then I felt his lips against mine. At first, it was a light touch. Then it turned into a deeper, more passionate kiss. It was like we had both been waiting for this moment to come. But now that it was real, we didn't know what to do. I hope you all like my video and leave a comment. Our kiss didn't last long, but those few seconds were enough to change everything. Ethan slowly pulled back and looked into my eyes. There was a kind of confusion and fear in his eyes. I felt the same way. What had we done? Was this right? But at the same time, I knew I had been waiting for this moment to come. "Laura," he said, his voice still shaking. "Is this right? Is it right to do this?" I looked into his eyes and tried to understand the complex emotions inside me. Ethan was no longer a child. He was John's son, yes, but he was also a man who supported me, who understood me. We were not related by blood, but we had a bond that had changed and transformed over time. "I don't know, Ethan," I whispered, "but I know I feel it. I feel you." Ethan touched my face. His hands were warm, but still shaking. "I feel you too, Laura," he said. "But I'm scared. Is that true? Where does this end?" I looked into his eyes and tried to suppress the fear inside me. "I don't know," I repeated. "But right now, I want to be with you. I want to feel you." Ethan slowly leaned toward me and touched his lips to mine again. This time, our kiss was slower, deeper. Our hands were exploring each other. His skin was warm, his breathing fast. I felt the same way. It was as if we had both been waiting for this moment to come. But now that it was real, we didn't know what to do. Please subscribe to support me. When Ethan's lips touched mine, everything stopped. It was like time froze and it was just the two of us. His breathing was fast. His hands were warm. I felt the same way. It was like we had both been waiting for this moment to come. But now that it was real, we didn't know what to do. Ethan slowly pulled back and looked into my eyes. There was a kind of confusion and fear in his eyes. I felt the same way. What had we done? Was this right? But at the same time, I knew I had been waiting for this moment to come. "Laura," he said, his voice still shaking. "Is this right? Is it right to do this?" I looked into his eyes and tried to understand the complex emotions inside me. Ethan was no longer a child. He was John's son, yes, but he was also a man who supported me, who understood me. We were not related by blood, but we had a bond. A bond that had changed and transformed over time. "I don't know, Ethan," I whispered, "but I know I feel it. I know I feel you. Please subscribe to support me." Ethan touched my face. His hands were warm but still shaking. "I feel you too, Laura," he said. "But I'm scared. Is that true? Where will this end?" I looked into his eyes and tried to suppress my fear. "I don't know," I repeated. "But right now, I want to be with you. I want to feel you." Ethan slowly leaned toward me and touched his lips to mine again. This time, our kiss was slower, deeper. Our hands were exploring each other. His skin was warm, his breathing fast. I felt the same way. It was like we'd both been waiting for this moment to come. But now that it was real, we didn't know what to do. When Ethan's hands gripped my waist, all thoughts inside me were erased. I just wanted to feel it. His warmth, his closeness, his presence. But the little voice echoing in the back of my mind still wouldn't stop. Was this really true? As our kiss deepened, the contradiction inside me began to grow. Was this love I was feeling? Or was it the lure of loneliness, of the forbidden? Ethan had always been a confidant to me, a friend. But now, as his lips explored my skin, friendship seemed a distant memory. "Ethan, we can't do this," I said, my voice shaking. He was breathing the same way, his eyes blurry. "Why, Laura? Deny what we're feeling?" I took a deep breath, trying to compose myself. "It's complicated. John, your father, he did so much for me. And you mean a lot to me too. But if we keep this up, we could ruin everything." Ethan frowned and looked into my eyes. "But you felt it too, didn't you? That thing between us? It's not just me, I know that." "Yes, I felt it. I still felt it. But was it enough?" I took a step toward him, put my hands on his face, and shook my head from side to side. "I know what we feel, Ethan. But sometimes our feelings aren't the most accurate." A shadow appeared in his eyes. Maybe it was pain, maybe disappointment. But then he nodded, pulling back with a forced smile. "All right," he said in a low voice. "But no, Laura, whatever happens, I will always feel you." And in that moment, I felt something inside me break, Ethan's words hanging in the air. I tried to avert my eyes from his as my chest rose and fell rapidly, but I couldn't. In that moment, there was a determination in his eyes. A determination that wouldn't back down. A determination that would risk everything. He pulled me to him once more. "If you want this, why do you resist?" He whispered in my ear, his voice breathy. I swallowed. "Because I'm afraid, Ethan." "Then let's be scared together," he said, and pressed his lips to my neck. This time I didn't pull back. My hands slid against my will to Ethan's back, to his shoulders. As my fingers felt his muscles, all the contradictions inside me melted away. He wrapped his hands around my waist and gently guided me toward the bed in the corner of the room. My heart was pounding madly. Was this a mistake? Maybe it was, but I was ready to get lost in the moment. Ethan gently sat me down on the edge of the bed and got between my knees, looking into my face. "If you don't want to, we can stop right now," he said, his voice softer now. "I want this," I whispered, and after giving me a reassuring look, he pressed his lips to mine again. But this time, our kisses were not slow. They were full of hunger. Our hands were on a voyage of discovery, trying to find each other, to understand each other. Ethan's fingers reached for the buttons on my shirt. He didn't leave my eyes as he undid each one, as if he would stop if he saw me hesitate even once. When my shirt slipped off my shoulders and fell to the bed, the cold air brushed against my skin. But Ethan's warm touch made me forget about it. "Laura," he whispered as he gently laid me on the bed. "I'm here," I said, without taking my eyes off him. And that night, we both put aside our fears and surrendered only to what we felt. Ethan's touch spread through my skin like a fire, an indescribable excitement growing inside me with each kiss. His fingers trembled as they explored my body, but it wasn't timidity, it was passion. If anyone is curious about the rest, let me know in the comments. I lost track of time. It was just us in the bedroom, our breaths mingling, our skin getting closer with every touch. Ethan's name was like a prayer on my lips as he pulled me into his world. We sank deeper and deeper, wanting more with every touch. Our bodies moved in harmony as our heartbeats mingled. This was not just a physical union. It was an explosion of emotions that had been growing inside us for a long time. When we reached the top, it was as if the world stopped. I was just in his arms and he in mine. We were breathless, sweaty, but happy. We didn't need to say anything. Ethan rested his head on my shoulder and whispered, "I'll always remember this." I smiled, stroked his hair, and closed my eyes. In that moment, no matter what was happening in the outside world, it was just us. And that was more real than anything else.